Problem is when you got too many papers and they get blended together and all of a sudden you can't figure out which one's which. That's not good. All right, can y'all hear me okay? Everybody hear me okay? Good. Because I know the mic was still set, I think, for Jeremy and Jeff, and they've got a considerable amount of height on me. I didn't get that gene. But it's okay. If you look at my relatives, anybody in my family that's over 6 feet tall, they married in. They married in. We didn't. We all stop about 5'10". So I've got the hard job tonight. I was joking around with Jeff Sunday night. I said, we need to have a talk with FH about leading off with Clarence DeLoach and then us having to go after him. Because the job he did, I said, that's a hard act to follow. And then Jeff and Jeremy last night, yet again, another hard act to follow. So I'm going to try to keep up the run of good lessons we've had, and hopefully we'll do that. Tonight's topic is devotion. Devotion. You might have got that from what Flash and John were up here doing, and I'm glad that that's Flash doing that because I don't know how long it would take me to pull my hamstring or a quad, but I would have done it by now. So, devotion. And that's our topic tonight, and we're going to look at that through the account of Naomi and Ruth. I want to try to give Naomi a little bit more credit here because I think sometimes the book is entitled Ruth. So Ruth gets all the hype from it. She gets the name recognition, what have you. And I think sometimes we do that at a disservice to Naomi. And sometimes neglect, don't realize just how prominent of a role she plays in it. So we're definitely going to try to highlight a little more about Naomi's actions and what Naomi does as we go through this discussion tonight. Help if I turn this on. There we go. All right, so let's start just with a little bit of a foundational discussion here. What is devotion? What does that mean? There are some words we have that are, I'll call biblical terminology that we don't use as much nowadays, but devotion's one I'd say we probably use even more now. What does that mean? Commitment, that's a good one. Anybody got anything else? Here's what I wrote down. I pulled a definition from the dictionary that said love, loyalty, or enthusiasm for someone or something. And I added the word deep in front of that because generally when we think of people that are devoted to something or a passion that you have that you are devoted to, it seems like it goes deeper than just the average love or excitement. There's something that takes it to this extra level, this extra importance. Focused dedication, I think, is another term that we can throw out there. A focused dedication. And I want to think about that through some examples. School and work. The people that you find that are really, really passionate about their job, passionate about what they do for a living. A lot of times they're very devoted to their work. It's very important to them. They give it a lot of emphasis. They really put a lot of focus there. Bring up school. When I was in law school, and it's my understanding, I think this is required for most of the ABA accredited schools, we actually had to sign something the first day of classes as first year students to say that we were promising we wouldn't work more than 15 hours a week outside of our studies. Why? Because they expected us to be that devoted to the content. They expect us to be spending that much time focused in on that material. Hobbies and interest areas. Okay, that's another one where we can talk about devotion a lot. The things that we have a passion for, the things that we take an interest in. I'll go ahead and tell you, I'm devoted to NASCAR. I love it. And it's a little bit obsessive, but I watch for when the latest Dale Jr. download will drop on Tuesday or Wednesday. If the races are running on the weekend, I'm trying to watch them. If Lauren's not at the house during the week and I've got some free time, I'm on YouTube watching reruns of old races, 80s and 90s, going back a few of them in the 70s. I've got a devotion to that. I've got a devotion to other areas where I've got hobbies. Athletic training, that's another one where we see it a lot today. People that have a real devotion to things. Tom Brady, quarterback for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That still sounds weird to say after all those years in New England. I'm not a big Tom Brady fan. He was cool when he was, the first couple of years was, okay, the 6th round draft pick's doing good. Okay, now he's winning too much, and I'll cheer against whoever's playing against Tampa Bay. But think about Tom Brady. The man is in his mid-40s and still playing at the top levels of professional athletics. It's almost unheard of, especially for the position he plays. If you go back and look, he's got his own fitness program, his own nutrition thing that he's worked up, where this man is literally going to extreme levels of devotion, extreme levels of focus to make sure that his body is in top condition, physically and mentally, and that he is so focused and zoned in on football, on what his job is, that he's not going to let anything else interrupt that. The extremes he goes to are almost mind-boggling, but they speak to his devotion. I'll go ahead and tell you, I have tried to be devoted to some athletic regimens, some training from time to time, and then there's this wonderful thing called Christmas and Thanksgiving that come around, and my wife is a really good cook, and you can guess where that athletic training goes. Not paying any attention to it, but I am all over the baked goods. So these are things that we see with devotion. Sometimes devotion can be to an individual. Before that, we mentioned ideas, activities, places even. But sometimes devotion is to an individual. And some examples of that, I think these are going to be fairly obvious, but spouse. If you're married, you have a devotion, or at least you should, to your spouse. You're going to try to put their needs first. You're going to try to do the things that are important to them, to care for them, help take care of them, provide for them, work with them, spend time with them, things of that nature. There's a natural devotion there. Another one, parent and child. There's got to be some levels of devotion there, especially when the children are still small. And you as parents, it's your job, it's your responsibility to take care for them, to see to the needs that they cannot meet for themselves, to help care for them, provide them food, shelter, encouragement, spiritual encouragement. That's on the parent. And then as the roles reverse, if Father Time allows it to do so, as the children get older and the parents get older, well, sometimes it works the other way. The child then has to take care of the parent a little bit. I've watched my parents do that, especially with my two grandfathers and some of the health issues that they had as they got older. I saw children that were devoted to caring for their parents and did right by them in that regard. Sometimes it's close friends. We've got friends, even relatives, that we are very much devoted to, that we try to spend extra time with, we try to soak up knowledge from, learn from. We call them for advice, they call us for advice. There's a very significant relationship there. So thinking about that, why do we become devoted to someone or something? And this is going to tie in with Ruth as we start to get into her life in a few minutes. But why do we become devoted to someone or something? Common interests. That's a good one. What else? Because we care about them. Yeah. There's usually, I won't go so far as to say all the time or in every situation, but I would say a lot of the time, in a lot of situations, there is something that they did for us or we did for them that allows that relationship to become stronger than otherwise would be. There's a level of trust, and we'll talk about that in a minute. There's a level of trust that's built in. There are, in some cases, levels of confidence and knowing counsel. I know I've got a short list of people that if I've got a decision I need to make on something, I know that they've got experience in that area, they've got knowledge in that area. I'm going to call and ask them for advice, and I know that they'll do the same with me if the roles were reversed. I'm very fortunate, very blessed. I've got good friends like that I can call me, or I can call them, they can call me. We can have that kind of exchange. But a lot of times it's because of something good that someone has done for us, somewhere that they have helped us or encouraged us or just done something to lift us up. So with that, let's get into the book of Ruth. And if you want to go ahead and if you got your Bibles and you want to have it open there, we're going to be in Ruth for most of the night tonight. We'll bounce over into Leviticus a little bit, but those are going to be brief little stops. Ruth chapter 1. These events, as you see up on the PowerPoint there, these events that are written in this book occur during the period of the Judges. While the Judges are ruling in Israel. This is a period, Joshua, whom we talked about last night, has died, and we don't yet have kings in play yet. Saul is, there's no King Saul or anything like that. We're in this period in between where the children of Israel don't really have a head of state or head of government in the sense that we would think about it today. There's not a Moses or a Joshua at the top of the food chain, and there's no king. They are ruled by these judges who have certain levels of authority. They come and go. There's no right to the throne or anything like that from birth or anything of that nature. It's just they come and go. God will raise one up. Children of Israel do well. That judge will die. Children of Israel will do okay for a little while. Then they'll fall back into sin, get in trouble, cry out to God. God raises up a judge. Children of Israel do well again. That judge dies. Rinse and repeat. It's that same cycle throughout the whole book of Judges. So it's during that time with that background that the events in Ruth, that they are taking place. So what goes on, we see there in the beginning in verses 1 through 5. It really is a pretty sad start to a biblical text. One of the sadder introductory matters, I think, that we have in Scripture, where essentially there is a famine in Israel. Naomi and her husband Elimelech, their two sons, Mahlon and Chilion, they leave Israel. They go to Moab due to a famine because they are really struggling in Israel. They understand that there is, better situation in Moab, so they leave. They go to that area. While they are there, it turns into great sadness for Naomi. Her husband dies, and then her two sons marry. They marry Moabite women, one named Orpah, the other one named Ruth. And then after that, Naomi's sons die. So all of a sudden, they're in a situation where she is a sojourner. She's essentially an immigrant in a land that's not her own. And she's left without any real family. Her two sons are gone. Her husband is gone. So we've got three people now in a tough situation. Three ladies in a tough situation. Why is this a tough situation for them? Aside from the emotional and the mental struggle here, all of that part, from a practical standpoint, why is this a tough situation? Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, you've got a situation where you've got some cultural differences here between the participants, for sure. Dan, I think I heard you. Okay. Anybody got anything else? Yeah. That's it. And that's going to be a big part of this from a legal perspective at this time and place. And I know I have to check myself sometimes and remember what Brother Clarence spoke about Sunday night, where it is necessary to look at the Bible from time to time in the context of the period in which it was written and in the period of which the events occurred. And we get, I don't know, I think a little too spoiled today to some of the modern legal protections that we know we have that actually aren't that new in the grand scheme of things. Legally, these three ladies are not protected. There's not really any form of property rights for them. And the reason that matters is because that's how you establish wealth at that time. That's where wealth is going to come from, is property rights. And as a practical matter, they don't have any. And adding to that, we've got the cultural divide. Naomi is essentially an immigrant in a foreign land. She's not a Moabite. These are not her people. Her two daughters-in-law are probably in a little bit better shape because their people, I would assume, are somewhere close. Naomi's not. Naomi's all alone. So we've got that situation as a backdrop, which means some hard decisions have to be made. Hard decisions about what's going to happen next. From a practical matter, what's Naomi going to do? What is Ruth going to do? What's Orpah going to do? These three all have to make a decision, and they can make it collectively, they can make it independently, but they're still going to have to come up with a game plan for how they're going to navigate this situation. Let's pick up with the text in chapter 1 and verse 6. And let's look at what Naomi has to say about it. It says, Then she arose, and that being Naomi, with her daughters-in-law to return from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the fields of Moab that the Lord had visited his people and given them food. So she set out from the place where she was with her two daughters-in-law, and they went on the way to return to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her two daughters-in-law, Go, return each of you to her mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you, as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you may find rest, each of you in the house of her husband. Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. So Naomi gets the news that, hey, the situation's improved in Israel. I'm able to go back there now, and it's not going to be a starvation issue. The famine's over with. I'm going to be in better shape. Why do you think she tells her daughter-in-laws to stay there? It's their home. Yeah, I don't think this is. I don't think this is in any way Naomi just wanting to be by herself. She knows that they're going to be in a better shape probably in Moab. She's really attempting to look out for their best interests, or at least what she believes are their best interests, by saying, no, the two of you stay here. So let's pick up and see some of the responses. There's a little bit of pushback. Verse 10, it says, And they said to her, No, we will return with you to your people. But Naomi said, Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb that they may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters, go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should say I have hope, even if I should have a husband this night, should bear sons, would you therefore wait till they were grown? Would you therefore refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, for it is exceedingly bitter to me for your sake that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me. Then they lifted up their voices and wept again, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, and Ruth clung to her. So now, their initial pushback, Ruth and Orpah's initial pushback is, no, we're going to stay with you. We're in this with you. We're going to be there with you. And she brings up what we know is the term of Levirate marriage and some of the issues that relate to that. What this is, if you go back to the book of Deuteronomy in chapter 25 is where this is covered, and it's something today that I think a lot of us would look at here in 2021 and go, well, this is awkward. But what that was the concept that if you were married to a man and he died and you had no heir, his brother would then marry you to produce an heir to that deceased brother's line. Again, something that today we're looking at going, That's going to get awkward at the family reunion in a hurry. But back then, no, this was a way to ensure property rights. It was a way to ensure people remained cared for, in good shape financially, as well as provided for in the community. So there's a little bit of a this is all about welfare at that point. And that's what this is all about, is welfare. And probably one of the more famous examples of it is Judah, in Genesis chapter 38. We won't get into that tonight, but there's a whole interesting family situation that comes about because of that there. But that's what Naomi, her argument is. She says, look, even if you want that to happen, I'm too old to bear sons, and even if I weren't, would you really wait until they were grown and old enough under that culture to do it? And she's literally laying out all the logical and to some extent factual impossibilities about the proposition there and why it's going to be difficult. Let me ask you this, because we're on the topic of devotion. Are Naomi's actions here an attempt to show her devotion to Orpah and Ruth? Yeah, I think it is. I think it is, because if you look, she is doing what she knows is in their best interest by telling them to stay there in Moab while she goes back to Israel. She knows that she'll be provided for better in Israel than she would be in Moab. She's going to tell them to stay. She is literally trying to show her devotion and her care and concern for those two by telling them to stay and to go back to their mother's house. We're going to get into Ruth's response now, though, because Ruth is going to take this a different way. We just read there is the verse concluded in verse 14 that Orpah kissed her mother-in-law. It didn't mean Orpah gave in to what Naomi wanted. She went on her way and went back to her people. It says, but Ruth clung to her. And picking up in verse 15, Naomi speaking, and says, see, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law. But Ruth said, do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me from you. And when Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more. She said no more. How serious is Ruth about staying? Totally. She is completely intent and focused on staying. There is nothing, she literally said that there is nothing that's going to pull her away from Naomi's side. Look again, verse 17, where she literally makes a vow. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me from you. That is the strongest possible language that Ruth could use to indicate absolutely how serious she is about staying with Naomi and seeing this situation through. What does this tell us about Ruth and Naomi's relationship? Yeah, Ruth is literally willing. Whatever has gone on in the past between her and Naomi, she is so devoted that she's literally saying, no, I'm going to stick by you regardless. There is nothing else that's going to pull my focus from sticking beside you. How do you think that meant Naomi was as a mother-in-law?
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Because she had to see, Ruth had to see something there in this woman
Right.
But she saw something there in Naomi and the hardship, the common hardship that they'd all gone through, that she wants to stay with.
Yep. I'm going to get out of order a little bit on the questions I had, so I'm going to not worry with the slides for just a second. But look at the fact that Ruth is making this vow and saying that your people will be my people, your God, my God. And then continuing on there, may the Lord do so to me and more also, if anything but death parts me from you. Remember, Ruth is a Moabite. So the God of Israel is not necessarily where her focus has been. I'm not saying she hasn't been exposed to the ideas and the concepts of Jewish faith at all, but it's not going to be her bread and butter. And yet she's already telling Naomi, your God, Jehovah God, will be my God, and making this vow before the Lord. And she is specifically saying that. What does that tell us about what Naomi has done in terms of sharing her faith with her daughters-in-law? She lived it. She had done something throughout and depending on how you want to interpret the text in chapter 1, there's a couple ways that I can make an argument for reading on the time frame. But they had been together at most probably about 10 years in each other's presence, Ruth and Naomi, with the most generous reading of that time frame. Somewhere in that 10 years, they have developed an understanding with each other. And something about Naomi's faith has rubbed off onto Ruth. Either she's learned it by watching, she's been taught it, somehow or another, what Naomi has done, that has really and truly rubbed off on Ruth. What Dan? Yeah, well, I don't know if everybody could hear that, but what Dan was saying was that Naomi's actions showed even more of a godly nature. Even on top of just typical human kindness, it showed that godly love. Dan, did I get that right? Okay. I always worry when I'm trying to kind of phrase back what other people have said. I want to make sure I'm getting it right, but that's what it was. She is really showing a godly love toward Ruth. Now let's look at it from this perspective. Is Ruth's action of devotion here? Her devotion toward Naomi is manifesting itself in this idea that, no, I am going to be where you are. I'm going to stay where you stay. I'm going to lodge where you lodge. Naomi, I'm going to be right here beside you every step of the way. Is there any risk for Ruth in doing that? Yeah. There is enormous risk to Ruth. We don't know what she may or may not have had still in Moab in terms of family or connections, what have you. But nonetheless, Moab was still her native land. She knew it. She knew where she could go. She knew who the people she could talk to were, where the potential was for her to find another husband, even perhaps, to be cared for. But she throws that out the window. She's not worried about that. She says, Naomi, I'm sticking right here with you. Where you go, that's where I'll go. Where you are, I'm going to be there. This is absolutely flies in the face of any common sense logic of what action you should take right here. If you're going based off of just common sense, looking at the real world reality, Orpha made the right call. because Orpah stayed in Moab. But Ruth had a different level of faith. And Ruth had a different level of devotion even to Naomi, that she trusted Naomi that much, and she believed that much in what Naomi was doing, that she's going to stick by her. Ruth is now running the risk because she knows they're going back to Israel. Ruth has no guarantees of, one, how she'll be treated by the Israelite people. She has no clue about that, doesn't know if that's going to work or not. She has no idea if she will be able to find a husband or to find any way to care for herself or to help care for Naomi. She is literally walking into a giant unknown without any help, without any real legal protection that she's aware of. Now, fortunately for her, and we're going to get into this after we come back from the snack break, there are some protections built in for the poor and for the widows under the Mosaic Code, and we'll get into that a little bit after we've had some snacks. How much of that does Ruth know? I don't know. I don't know how much Naomi may or may not have told her, what she's told her about Israel and about the culture there and about how they do things. But Ruth is really jumping out on a limb. And I think sometimes we don't appreciate just how much Ruth is jumping out on that limb and how much she's telling Naomi, no, we're in this together. And literally these two are jumping out into a world of unknown where they can only really hope and pray for good results. And I think if you look at Naomi's attitude on this, I'm not sure where Naomi's focus is at this point either. Because as we pick up there in chapter 1, going into verse 19, it says, so the two of them, Ruth and Naomi, went on until they came to Bethlehem. And when they came to Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the women said, is this Naomi? And she said to them, do not call me Naomi, call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has testified against me, and the Almighty has brought his calamity upon me? That tells me right there that Naomi wasn't exactly walking back into Israel with a happy demeanor. She wasn't walking in there with the expectations, oh, hey, this is going to work out really good. No. She is clearly at a low point on this. Do you think Ruth's devotion, it may be helping her keep going a little bit? Yeah. I think there's a lot of argument to make here that no, Ruth is really carrying Naomi and helping to kind of push her on and maybe even help strengthen her own faith a little bit at this point with her actions. Yeah, go for it.
I know that Ruth's husband was not in the picture,
Mm-hmm.
but there would also be a love and devotion she had for her husband that she wanted to devote herself to.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think there's something to be said there, too, and I'm not sure if we can really glean from the text which one of the two sons Ruth was married to, but I think there's definitely something to be said there that the way that union was and that marriage was probably had an impact on Ruth's devotion to Naomi. That relationship was good enough that, no, she still wanted to stay on with Naomi and continue to work with her, help her out, guide her along. Anybody got any other questions or anything? I like to do questions. I like to make sure we're all thinking and not getting in a lull. So if you got questions or comments, please feel free to interject at any time. So I know we skipped it earlier, but going back to that final question, does it appear that Naomi's faith in God has had an impact on Ruth? Well, Naomi's or Ruth's husband, some combination of the two, it's absolutely had an impact. There's no way Ruth is making these decisions in this manner without some level of faith in Naomi and also faith in Naomi's God and trust that they are going in the right direction. By my watch, I've got about 6:53, so I think this is going to be a convenient time for us to pause and go get some refreshments, have snack time. Kim, what time do we need to be back in here? Okay, so we'll reconvene about 10 after 7, and we're going to look at the we're going to look at the aspect of trust on the topic of devotion and where that plays in. So let's go get some refreshments and we'll reconvene at 10 after 7. All right. Well, I'm glad to see it didn't run too many of y'all off after the first half of tonight's class. So as alluded to earlier, we're gonna spend the next few minutes going over the trust aspect of devotion as it plays out throughout the remainder of the book of Ruth, because we're going to see that there are going to be some situations arise, very important situations, where Ruth is going to have to trust what Naomi's telling her, and she doesn't have an option on it. So I want to begin with this idea, and if you think about it, I think that this really bears out, because I tried to figure out, okay, what comes first, devotion, trust, or faith? Because they feed into each other. Trust and faith are essential components of devotion. You're not going to be devoted to something that you don't either trust in or have faith in. Does that make sense? Think about the people that you are. Think about the people that you are devoted to. No, you trust them in some aspect. The friends I was talking about earlier, where we will call and talk to each other, solicit advice from one another. No, we have a trust between each other that, the things we ask, they stay between us, that it's going to be confidential, that they're going to respect that, and that all that's going to go on. From the law practice point of view, going back to my time in private practice, there was a trust aspect with the people who walked in there, because they had a matter that they wanted you to be able to help them with, assist with, whatever. There has to be that trust factor. And with the devotion, you've got to have trust, but you've also got to have faith in these people. You've got to be able to trust them and have faith in them enough to know that if they're going to give you advice, that they're giving you the best advice they can give you, and that they are either going to be making the correct decision that you're following. If you're devoted to someone and that person is a leader and you're working as a lieutenant, something like that, you've got to have devotion. You're devoted to them. You've got to have trust and faith making up that devotion. Without trust, because I literally sat there working on this, and I'm like, okay, wait a minute, what comes first, devotion or trust? Devotion or trust? And I'm like, well, the two kind of go hand in hand. They're kind of built in together, and trust and faith go along together in that as well. So in this situation where we have seen that there is a devotion between Ruth and Naomi, Naomi trusts Ruth. Naomi is devoted to Ruth's interest. Ruth is devoted to Naomi's interest. Ruth has a high level of trust in Naomi. That's part of that devotion, is that understanding between the two of them. So with that in mind, we're going to look at the rest of the book, and keep that in mind, the trust factor here as part of the devotion. As they arrive back in Israel, it's already noted, we read here in the last class session that it caused a stir to see Naomi back, and we covered this in Bible class. I think it was back in, I keep wanting to say, I can't remember if it was 2020 or 2019. 2020 was so long, I kind of forget. It was in the fall, or not the fall, but the winter quarter there. And we were discussing Ruth in the fellowship hall class. And, I posed the question, what was going to cause the bigger stir? Naomi coming back with her situation, or the new kid in town in Ruth? Which one was going to cause the bigger stir? And short answer, we don't know. We're going to get a little bit of information on that here in just a minute. But Ruth goes to glean in the field. I don't know about you, I don't talk about gleaning anything in a field during my day-to-day conversations with anybody. It never comes up. But what that refers to is a provision in Leviticus. It's given twice, Leviticus 19, 9 through 10, and then in 23:22. I'm going to bounce over to 23:22 just for the brevity's sake of it. But there it's written, it says, when you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap your field right up to its edge, nor shall you gather the gleanings after your harvest. You shall leave them for the poor and for the sojourner. I am the Lord your God. So that is a direct command to the children of Israel that when they get ready to harvest, there's certain areas they're not supposed to touch. They're not supposed to get the edges, and they're not supposed to gather the gleanings. So Ruth is going to go to glean. Why? Because she fits both of these. She's a sojourner, and pretty clear her and Naomi don't really have much in the way of material assets at this point. They don't have cash flow coming in. They're not in good shape. So they're going to qualify under both the poor and the sojourner. It just so happens that Ruth ends up gleaning in a field that belongs to a guy named Boaz. And I want to take a look at this exchange that takes place between Ruth and Boaz. It begins there in verse 8 of chapter 2. Let's read that together. It says, then Boaz said to Ruth, now listen, my daughter, do not go to glean in another field or leave this one. But keep close to my young women. Let your eyes be on the field that they are reaping and go after them. Have I not charged the young men not to touch you? And when you are thirsty, go to the vessels and drink what the young men have drawn. Then she fell on her face, bowing to the ground, and said to him, why have I found favor in your eyes, that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner? But Boaz answered her, all that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told to me, and how you left your father and mother in your native land and came to a people you did not know before. The Lord repay you for what you have done, and a full reward be given you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. Then she said, I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, for you have comforted me and spoken kindly to your servant, though I am not one of your servants. I don't know how long exactly they've been back in town. I wouldn't say it's been too long, but apparently word of Ruth's devotion to Naomi has already gotten around. Think of that song, Everybody Dies Famous in a Small Town. Well, apparently that was a small town, and the new people in town were pretty famous. But word has gotten around, and it's good word about Ruth, of her devotion to Naomi. And Boaz actually rewards that devotion. He says, no, you can glean here off my land, follow these people right here. Other people have been instructed to protect you, to keep you safe, not to lay a hand on you. If you get thirsty, there's where to get a drink. He is literally rolling out the red carpet in as much as he can. In terms of Boaz, the text tells us that he's a man of great wealth or standing. So pretty important there in the town. We know from chapter 3 that he's older in age. Not sure how old, but we get the impression that he's not a young guy, and we'll get to that as we get into chapter 3. When I was in fourth grade, we had had two separate teachers. We changed classes there in the middle of the day, and one of them had a saying that he always pushed on us, literally day in and day out, and I can still hear him in my head preaching this at the top of his lungs. He said, when you do good, good comes back to you. And that was his mantra, and that was what he tried to encourage all of us in, and it stuck. Okay, this is now, I'm not going to do the math on how many years later, but it's been several years later, and it still rings in my head crystal clear, his voice saying that. And this is an example of it. When you do good, good comes back to you. Ruth's devotion to Naomi is being rewarded by Boaz. She doesn't know Boaz. She doesn't know Boaz has any clue about who Naomi is, presumably. Now, she'll find out later that there's a connection, but she doesn't have information on any of that. She just knows this is somebody that's being nice to her. So let's skip down to verse 18 of chapter 2. And this is where you'll notice I've got up here the hatching a plan. This is the part where I don't know that we give Naomi enough credit for what she does. But picking up in verse 18, it says her mother-in-law there being Naomi, said to her being Ruth, "Where did you glean today? And where have you worked? Blessed be the man who took notice of you." So she told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked, and said, "The man's name with whom I work today is Boaz." And Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "May he be blessed by the Lord, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead." Naomi also said to her, "The man is a close relative of ours, one of our redeemers." And Ruth the Moabite said, "Besides, he said to me, 'You shall keep close by the young men until they have finished all my harvest.'" And Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, "It is good, my daughter, that you go out with his young women, lest in another field you be assaulted." So she kept close to the young women of Boaz, gleaning until the end of the barley and the wheat harvest, and she lived with her mother-in-law. Naomi is excited, and I don't know how long it took Ruth to pick up on why, but she's excited because, one, Boaz has shown tremendous kindness to Ruth and to Naomi with what he has given them, what he's doing for them, all of that. But she's excited because Boaz is a redeemer under the Mosaic law, under that Mosaic code. And there are a few different types of redeemers listed there. We're not going to get into all of them. There's, I think, 3 altogether, but only 2 are relevant for our study tonight. One is a property redeemer, and the other is the Levirate marriage that we talked about earlier. Property redeemer is essentially a person who can go back and redeem land, redeem real property, houses, things of that nature, for a destitute relative, or for a relative who has had to sell it due to debts, what have you. So Naomi recognizes right off the bat, Boaz is in a position to fill both of these redeemer hats. Yeah, he can redeem the property that belonged to her husband Elimelech, that they have not been at for some time, and he can also redeem Ruth through that Levirate marriage process. So Naomi knows right now. I would love to have seen the expression on her face when she started putting all this together, that she would have known that this is the best case scenario that she could hope for. And I don't know how much she's letting Ruth in on at this point, just right off the bat, but this is a situation where they have walked into absolute best case scenario. Naomi's smart about this because she's going to jump right into making a plan. And I want you to notice what's going to happen. The devotion that Ruth and Naomi are about to have to share with each other. The trust level that they're going to have. In chapter 3, verse 1, picking up there, it says, "Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, 'My daughter, should I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you? Is not Boaz our relative, with whose young women you were? See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Wash therefore and anoint yourself, and put on your cloak, and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. But when he lies down, observe the place where he lies, then go and uncover his feet, and lie down. And he will tell you what to do.' And she replied, 'All that you say, I will do.'" This is one of those things that, again, in our society today, we don't necessarily understand the customs that are in play here without some background research and some background effort on our part. But this is Naomi trying to arrange a union between Boaz and Ruth. That's what she is doing. She's given Ruth instructions that are essentially for Ruth to go in, and I'm going to try to paraphrase the custom as much as I can here, but for Ruth to go in with that attire and to pull the covers off of his feet was her way of signaling her availability for marriage and her intentions that she wanted him to be that redeemer for them. It was essentially, according to some of the archaeological resources I've looked at, it was a customary nonverbal means of requesting a marriage. Is this a risky move on Ruth's part? Yeah. This comes with a lot of risk. There's no guarantee that this is going to work. Because regardless of what Boaz's obligations may be under the law, Boaz has free moral agency. He's got the opportunity to decline. He's got the opportunity to mess up this whole plan that Naomi has put together. There's a full potential for this to not end well for Ruth. And she's got to know that going into it. Naomi's got to know that going into it. Why does Naomi want Boaz to redeem both the property and Ruth? Why would Naomi want that? Yeah, this is about Ruth's benefit. Because Boaz is in the unique position to be able to do both. So if this goes according to the plan Naomi is hatching, Boaz will be able to buy back her late husband's property. Boaz can marry Ruth, produce an heir, and that property is right back in the family line. Ruth is then taken care of. Naomi will be taken care of. And any future children born to that union, which, spoiler alert, there is at least one, will be taken care of. So this is a big deal for Naomi. This is a big thing. She's throwing all her eggs in this basket, and Ruth is going right along with her. What level of trust and devotion is Ruth showing to Naomi at this point? Is it too much to say that Ruth is probably putting her life in Naomi's hands? I think they're both kind of putting each other's lives in their hands. They are really jumping out on a limb here to try to make sure that this succeeds. They go through with this plan, and in chapter 4, throughout chapter 3, the discussion takes place. Ruth goes along with what Naomi has asked her to do. She agrees to do it. She goes in. And in chapter 3, let's see, beginning about start at verse 8. It says, "At midnight the man was startled and turned over, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. And he said, 'Who are you?' And she answered, 'I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer.' And he said, 'May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. You have made this last kindness greater than the first, in that you have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do all for you that you ask, for all my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman. And now it is true that I am a redeemer, yet there is a redeemer nearer than I. Remain tonight, and in the morning, if he will redeem you, good, let him do it. But if he is not willing to redeem you, then as the Lord lives, I will redeem you. Lie down until in the morning.' So she lay at his feet until the morning, but arose before one could recognize another. And he said, 'Let it not be known that a woman came to the threshing floor.' And he said, 'Bring the garment you are wearing and hold it out.' So she held it, and he measured out 6 measures of barley and put it on her. Then she went to the city. And when she came to her mother-in-law, she said, 'How did you fare, my daughter?' And she told her all that the man had done for her, saying, 'These 6 measures of barley he gave me, for he said to me, you must not go back empty-handed to your mother-in-law.' She replied, 'Wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest, but will settle the matter today.'" Ruth's devotion to Naomi, their trust in each other, is now going to be rewarded, because Boaz understands what he's being asked to do, and he's told him he's willing to do it. He's in a position to do it, and that he can do it, but that there's apparently one other relative that is a closer relation to Elimelech than Boaz is. So he said, we've got to go get that straightened out first. And then Naomi clears it up, says, no, if he did all this, this is going to get settled today. that this is going to have a resolution today. So in chapter 4, as it starts there, verse 1, Boaz goes to the city gate to wait there, and it says, "Behold, the Redeemer of whom Boaz had spoken came by. So Boaz said, 'Turn aside, friend, sit down here.' And he turned aside and sat down, and he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, 'Sir, down here.' So they sat down. And then he said to the Redeemer, 'Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling the parcel of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. So I thought I would tell you of it and say, buy it in the presence of those elders sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me that I may know, for there is no one besides you to redeem it, and I come after you.' Then he said, 'I will redeem it.' And then Boaz said, 'The day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the widow of the dead, in order to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance.' Then the Redeemer said, 'I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption for yourself, for I cannot redeem it.'" It says, "Now this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging. To confirm a transaction, the one drew off his sandal and gave it to the other, and this was the manner of attesting it in Israel." So they're going to go through and they're going to take off the sandal and confirm that transaction. Boaz indeed does what Naomi predicts he will do. He goes and he tries to settle the matter. And he addresses it with the one who's closer, that closer relative says, "Oh, that's fine. I'll be glad to take the property. I'll take the land all day long." He said, "Oh, but there's a catch. If you take that, you've got to take Ruth too." And for whatever reason, this relative is not in a position to do so. I don't know if it's because it would impair some other relationship at his house. He indicates that it's going to mess up his own inheritance. But for whatever reason, he can't do it. So Boaz is finally able to redeem both Ruth and the property. And he is able to set up that, to make way that inheritance for Naomi, for Ruth, and to continue Elimelech's line and keep it alive. Now I want to think about this. There's a lot of ins and outs and a lot of the cultural backgrounds at play for the Israelites. But think about this. Do you think Ruth understood Naomi's actions at every point during this plan? I don't. I hope Naomi at least let her in on a little of it, and the text doesn't record that for us, but we've got no way to know. So I don't know that Ruth understood what Naomi was doing at every point in time. Do you think Ruth and Naomi were both aware of just how risky what they were doing was? I think they probably had to be. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's there. I think there was definitely that connection between Ruth and Boaz, and I think you're right. Naomi picked up on that, and she decided to play that to the full tilt for all that it was worth. There was an account that this reminds me of, a real life story. There was a very, very kind lady. She worked at the high school I graduated from, and she was actually there as an employee at the school when my mother graduated high school from there several decades before I went through. And by the time I came around, she was retired, but she volunteered and she came back to the school every day. She had one son, and that son lived out of state. And that son predeceased her. I think he died somewhere around the time I graduated high school. But that daughter-in-law went on to remarry, and she actually eventually, as the mother-in-law got older, into her 90s, she called her and had her come live with her in North Carolina and continued to take care of her until she herself passed away. So, real life Ruth and Naomi connections, that devotion does go on. Those, even today, that devotion between two people like that. I want to end with this question, because tying this all in with what we're talking about with this theme of champions this week. Can we be as devoted to the cause of Christ as Ruth was to Naomi, and as devoted to it as Naomi was to Ruth? I think that's the challenge we've all got. You know, Jesus told the disciples about the challenges they would face, and indicated to them that their road was not going to be easy, and we know historically that it wasn't. From what we can tell, only one of the apostles actually died in old age of what we would today probably call a natural cause. So those guys were willing to be devoted. They were willing to go through extreme suffering, through Peter's case, what we believe was an upside-down crucifixion. In some cases, beheadings, things like that. They were willing to sacrifice it all for Christ. Their devotion serves as a model for us. Can we be as devoted to the cause of Christ as Ruth was to Naomi? That's the challenge that each of us are going to have, and that's one that we've got to continue to embrace and work on day after day. And we'll find that the more that we reach out to God, the more that we trust in Christ, the more that trust will be reciprocated, and that faith will be rewarded. The Old Testament tells us, I believe it was a speech from one of the prophets to one of the kings. It said, "The Lord is with you while you seek." Let me find it real quick. I've got it marked in my Bible. I want to make sure I get that verse right. Yeah, it's 2 Chronicles chapter 15. Begins about verse 2, or starting verse 1. It says, "The Spirit of God came upon Azariah, the son of Oded, and he went out to meet Asa and said to him, 'Hear me, Asa, and all Judah and Benjamin. The Lord is with you while you are with him. If you seek him, he will be found by you, but if you forsake him, he will forsake you. The Lord is with you while you are with him. If you seek him, he will be found by you.'" If our devotion remains to the cause of Christ and to the Almighty God, that devotion will be rewarded. I thank all of you for your time and attention tonight. I think we've got about 5 minutes before the younger groups start coming in to wrap up for the night. Does anybody have any questions or anything, comments? Through this line. Because I believe, if I'm remembering right, I believe Ruth is actually David's grandmother. I believe I'm getting my genealogy right. It's great-grandmother. Yep. And then through that line will eventually come Christ himself. So, all right. Thank you all very much. Like I said, I think we've got about 5 minutes for everybody to chit-chat, and then the kiddos will be coming in, and I'm sure they'll be amped up to a whole